She said, "I'm broken," until the cowboy said, "Then let me be the one to hold the pieces." From the outside, she seemed like a normal young woman working in a small town cafe, smiling politely at customers and taking orders with a calm, professional demeanor. But inside, Emily's heart carried invisible scars. She had grown up feeling like she didn't quite belong, as though the world expected something from her that she could never fully give. Her parents had been distant, wrapped up in their own struggles, leaving Emily to navigate life largely on her own. Over time, this sense of being alone grew into a deep, quiet ache, one she had learned to hide beneath her polite smiles and quiet manners. Emily's days followed a strict routine. She would wake up early, brew her coffee, and prepare for a long day at the cafe. She had a few friends in town, but most of her interactions felt surface level, conversations that never reached the heart of who she was. She preferred it that way. Opening up to people had always ended in disappointment or pain. It was safer to keep her thoughts and feelings to herself, to live quietly in the shadows of her own life. One evening, after a particularly long day at the cafe, Emily stayed behind to clean up. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The cafe was empty except for her, the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the clinking of utensils filling the space. As she stacked the last few cups, the bell above the door jingled. She looked up, startled, and saw a man standing in the doorway. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a rugged appearance that suggested he was no stranger to hard work. His boots were dusty, and the brim of his hat shaded a face that was kind but weathered by life. There was something steady and calm about him, a quiet strength that immediately drew her attention. Emily felt a flutter of curiosity but reminded herself to remain polite and professional. "Evening," he said, his voice low but warm. "Mind if I sit for a moment?" Emily hesitated for a second, unsure of what to say. There was something about him that felt different, non-threatening, patient, almost as if he could see beyond her carefully constructed walls. "Of course," she replied softly, gesturing to a small table near the window. He removed his hat and sat down, his eyes scanning the cafe with a thoughtful gaze. Emily continued her cleaning but found her movements slower, her mind distracted by the presence of this stranger. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "You work here?" he asked. "Yes," Emily said. "I usually stay late to clean up. It's quieter this way." He nodded, a small smile appearing on his face. "I like quiet, makes it easier to think." There was a pause, a comfortable silence that stretched between them. Emily wasn't used to this kind of calm attention. Most people either rushed her with questions she didn't want to answer or spoke too loudly, not giving her the space she needed. But this man, this cowboy, seemed to understand something unspoken. For reasons she couldn't explain, Emily felt a small, cautious pull to speak honestly. I'm broken," she admitted, almost in a whisper, as if saying it out loud made it real. She immediately wished she hadn't said it, worried that he might think she was weak or foolish. The man looked at her carefully, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Then let me be the one to hold the pieces." Emily blinked, surprised. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Most people had turned away when she showed vulnerability, had told her to move on or get over it. But this man, he didn't seem scared by her honesty. He didn't pity her. He simply offered his presence, a quiet willingness to be there without judgment. They talked for a while after that, though neither of them forced the conversation. Emily found herself sharing small fragments of her life, the loneliness she often felt, the way she sometimes stayed awake at night thinking about mistakes she had made or chances she had lost. Luke, as she later learned his name was, listened without interrupting, without offering empty reassurances. He didn't try to fix her, he just allowed her to speak, to be heard. As the evening wore on, Emily realized she had not felt this kind of ease with anyone in years. The fear that normally accompanied trust was present, but it was softened by the calm patience in his eyes. There was no pressure, no rush, just a quiet understanding, a silent promise that he would be there if she let him. The sun had set completely when Luke finally stood to leave. He tipped his hat, a small smile on his lips. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. Emily nodded, surprised at how much she wanted to see him again. "Yes, I think I'd like that," she said. As he walked out the door, Emily felt a strange mixture of hope and fear. She had spent so many years believing she had to carry her pain alone. But something about Luke made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to. That night, lying in her small apartment, Emily replayed the evening in her mind. She thought about the way he had looked at her, not with pity, but with recognition. The way he had said he would hold the pieces, not trying to take them away, but simply being willing to bear them alongside her. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she didn't have to be completely alone. The next morning, Emily went to the cafe earlier than usual. She felt a small spark of anticipation, a sense that something new was beginning. And when she saw Luke walk in again, dusty boots and all, she felt a quiet smile spread across her face. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of trust, the first step toward healing. Emily didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if things would be easy or if her heart would ever fully recover from the pain it carried. But she knew one thing. She had met someone who saw her, truly saw her, and didn't run away. And for someone who had always felt broken, that was a gift she wasn't sure she could have imagined even a week ago. And so, amidst the quiet clatter of cups and the hum of the cafe, a new story began, a story of trust, patience, and the slow, careful unfolding of a heart that had been waiting for someone willing to hold the pieces. After that first evening in the quiet cafe, Emily couldn't stop thinking about Luke. Something about him had touched a part of her heart she had long kept hidden, a part that had been locked away after years of hurt. She had spent so much of her life protecting herself, pretending to be strong while quietly struggling inside. But with Luke, it felt different. There was no pressure to perform or be someone she was. He had simply accepted her as she was, and that alone made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. Luke, for his part, seemed to move through life with a steady patience. He wasn't flashy or loud, but he had a presence that made people feel safe. He worked on a nearby ranch and spent his days tending to cattle, repairing fences, and managing the land with quiet skill. It was hard work, but it suited him. There was a simplicity and honesty to the life he led, and Emily found herself fascinated by it. She had grown up surrounded by rules, expectations, and small-town gossip, and Luke's calm, grounded way of living felt like a breath of fresh air. Over the next few weeks, Emily and Luke began to see more of each other. Sometimes he would come into the cafe for a cup of coffee, stopping to chat about simple things, the weather, the harvest, small-town news. Other times, she would catch glimpses of him at the farmer's market or walking along the dirt road near her apartment. Each encounter was gentle and unhurried. Emily started to feel a sense of excitement she hadn't experienced in a long time, a quiet anticipation whenever she knew he might appear. Their conversation slowly deepened. One afternoon, while Emily was taking a break outside the cafe, Luke joined her on the bench. They watched the sunlight filter through the leaves, creating patterns on the ground. Emily found herself talking more than she had intended, opening up about her childhood, the loneliness she often felt, and the mistakes she had made in relationships. Luke listened with careful attention, never interrupting, never judging. "I've been hurt so many times," Emily admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust again." Luke nodded, understanding clear in his eyes. "It's not easy to trust when you've been hurt, but it's not impossible. You just need to take it one step at a time." Emily appreciated his words, not because they were profound, but because they were real. He wasn't offering empty promises or trying to convince her to feel something she wasn't ready to feel. He was simply acknowledging her feelings and being willing to walk beside her. That was something she had rarely experienced in her life. As the days turned into weeks, Emily began to notice small changes in herself. She smiled more often, laughed at little things, and allowed herself to daydream about a future that didn't feel so heavy. Luke had a way of bringing lightness into her life without forcing it. A simple comment about the way the sunlight hit the town square, a shared joke about a clumsy chicken on his ranch, or a thoughtful question about her day. These small moments made her feel alive again. But with every small step toward trust, there was also fear. Emily knew her heart was fragile, that opening up meant risking pain. She often wondered if she was moving too fast, if she was setting herself up to be hurt again. There were nights when she lay in bed, replaying their conversations in her mind, asking herself if she was being foolish for allowing someone to matter so much. But then she would remember the way Luke had looked at her the first evening in the cafe, the quiet patience in his eyes, and she felt a flicker of courage. One Saturday, Luke invited Emily to visit his ranch. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to step into his world, but something in her told her to say yes. The drive to the ranch was quiet, the wind brushing against the car as they drove along the dusty road. When they arrived, Emily was struck by the beauty of the land, the rolling hills, the wide-open sky, and the gentle rhythm of farm life. It was a world so different from her own, yet it felt welcoming and safe. Luke showed her around the ranch, introducing her to the animals and explaining the daily chores he managed. Emily listened intently, fascinated by the way he cared for every detail, from feeding the horses to mending fences. There was a pride in his work, a sense of responsibility and dedication that Emily found deeply admirable. She began to see him not just as a kind man, but as someone with depth, integrity, and a quiet strength that complemented her own fragility. Throughout the visit, Luke was patient and encouraging, never rushing her or making her feel out of place. Emily felt a sense of belonging she hadn't known in years, as though she had stepped into a world where her past pain didn't define her. They shared a simple lunch on a wooden bench, the sun warm on their faces, and talked about everything from childhood memories to dreams for the future. Emily realized that opening up to Luke wasn't just about sharing her struggles. It was about discovering parts of herself she had long forgotten. As the afternoon faded into evening, they sat together watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple. Emily felt a quiet sense of peace, a rare feeling that seemed to settle in her chest. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't shadowed by fear and loneliness. Luke didn't force the moment or try to define it. He simply sat beside her, a steady presence in a world that often felt uncertain. In the weeks that followed, their bond grew stronger. Emily found herself seeking out moments to be near him, whether at the cafe, the farmer's market, or on small walks through the town. She began to trust not just him, but herself, the ability to feel, to hope, and to let someone matter without fearing the worst. And Luke, in turn, showed her that care and attention could be consistent, gentle, and kind. But trust was not something that came without challenge. Emily's past experiences often resurfaced, bringing doubt and hesitation. There were moments when she would pull back, questioning whether she was ready for this new connection. Each time, Luke met her retreat with patience, never forcing her, never giving up on her. His steady presence reminded her that healing wasn't a straight path. It was a journey, one that required time, care, and understanding. Through it all, Emily began to realize that being broken didn't make her unworthy. It didn't mean she was incapable of love or happiness. Instead, it meant she had survived, endured, and grown stronger in ways she hadn't acknowledged before. And Luke's quiet support, his willingness to hold her pieces without judgment, helped her see that strength in herself. By the end of the season, Emily and Luke had formed a bond rooted in understanding, patience, and shared experiences. Their relationship wasn't defined by grand gestures or dramatic moments, but by the small, meaningful ways they showed up for each other day after day. Emily began to see that true connection wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, being present, and accepting each other fully, even with all the cracks and imperfections. Emily often reflected on that first evening in the cafe when she had whispered, "I'm broken," and Luke had responded with, "Then let me be the one to hold the pieces." At the time, it had felt like a fragile promise, a delicate hope she wasn't sure she could trust. But as weeks turned into months, she realized it wasn't a fragile promise at all. It was a foundation. It was the beginning of a story where brokenness was not the end, but a step toward healing, understanding, and perhaps even love. In the quiet moments, Emily allowed herself to dream. She imagined days spent working at the cafe, followed by evenings on the ranch, helping with chores, laughing with Luke, and sharing stories under the open sky. She imagined a life where her past didn't hold her hostage, where she could be vulnerable without fear, and where love was not something distant but present and steady. And for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to step into that life. Even though fear and doubt still lingered in the corners of her heart, Emily understood something important. Healing was a process, and trust was built slowly, one shared moment at a time. Luke's presence had shown her that she didn't have to face her struggles alone, that someone could walk beside her through the dark, and that brokenness didn't have to define her future. And so, life continued in their small town, with quiet moments of connection, gentle laughter, and the steady unfolding of a friendship that carried the promise of something more. Emily didn't yet know what the future held, but she knew she was no longer walking through it entirely alone. And that, she realized, was the most important step of all. The summer was settling into a rhythm, warm days stretching into golden evenings, and Emily found herself looking forward to each moment she could spend with Luke. Their bond had grown slowly, quietly, like the roots of a tree reaching deep into the soil, sturdy and unshakable. She had started to believe that perhaps she could trust again, that maybe brokenness wasn't something to hide but something that could be shared. Luke's patience and steady presence had helped her see that trust didn't have to be rushed. One late afternoon, Luke invited Emily to help him with some work on the ranch. The sun was already low in the sky, casting long shadows over the fields. Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready for the physical work, but Luke smiled at her in that calm, reassuring way he always did. "You'll be fine," he said. "I'll show you everything." And with that, she followed him across the dusty path, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The work was harder than she expected. Carrying feed, mending fences, and moving equipment left her muscles sore and her hands rough. But Luke didn't let her feel overwhelmed. He guided her, offering encouragement and gentle advice, never making her feel incompetent. And despite the exhaustion, Emily found herself laughing more than she had in a long time, the sound of her own voice feeling strange but joyful. She realized that hard work, when shared with someone she trusted, could bring a strange kind of happiness, a sense of accomplishment she had rarely experienced. As the sun dipped lower, clouds began to gather, and Emily noticed a chill in the air. Dark streaks appeared on the horizon, the wind picking up with a sudden intensity. "We need to get inside," Luke said, his voice calm but firm. They hurried toward the barn, but the storm arrived faster than expected. Heavy rain began to fall, the wind whipping through the open fields. Emily felt a twinge of panic as lightning flashed across the sky, the distant roll of thunder shaking the ground beneath her feet. Luke stayed close, guiding her inside the barn and quickly securing the animals. His presence was a steady anchor amidst the chaos. Emily watched as he moved with practiced efficiency, calming the animals and making sure they were safe. She realized how much she admired him, not just for his strength, but for his calmness in the face of uncertainty. It was as if the storm outside mirrored the storm she had carried inside her heart, and yet Luke remained unshaken, a reminder that stability could exist even in the midst of fear. Once the animals were safe, they huddled together inside the barn, listening to the storm rage outside. Rain pelted the roof, lightning illuminated the wooden beams, and thunder shook the walls. Emily's heart raced, memories of past fears and disappointments creeping in. She felt small and fragile, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. But Luke didn't let her face it alone. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and grounding. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he said quietly. "It's okay to be scared. I'll be here." Emily felt a lump in her throat, a mixture of relief and gratitude. No one had ever said that to her before, not with such sincerity. In that moment, she allowed herself to lean into him, to let go of the walls she had built around her heart. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and for the first time in years, she cried without shame. She didn't have to hide her fear, her sadness, or her brokenness. Luke simply held her, steady and patient, letting her release the pain she had carried alone for so long. As the storm raged on, they talked in soft voices. Emily shared memories she had never told anyone, stories of her childhood, moments of loss, and the loneliness that had haunted her. Luke listened without interruption, offering gentle words of comfort and understanding. He shared some of his own struggles too, stories of hard work, mistakes made, and lessons learned. It was the first time Emily truly felt a connection that went beyond small talk or casual friendship. She realized that true intimacy wasn't about grand gestures. It was about being present, listening, and accepting each other fully. By the time the storm began to subside, night had fallen. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and the first stars appeared in the dark sky. Luke led Emily to a small loft in the barn where they could sit and dry off, sharing a simple meal of bread and cheese. The quiet of the night, broken only by the occasional drip of rain, created a sense of peace that Emily hadn't felt in years. She realized that amidst the chaos of the storm, she had discovered something profound. Vulnerability could be met with care, and brokenness didn't have to be faced alone. Over the next few days, the aftermath of the storm became a symbol of their growing bond. Luke helped repair fences, fix damage to the barn, and care for the animals. Emily joined him whenever she could, feeling stronger with each passing day. The experience had taught her that resilience wasn't about never falling. It was about finding someone who would help you rise again. She began to see Luke not just as a friend or companion, but as someone who could stand beside her through life's storms, literal and metaphorical. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on a hill overlooking the ranch. The sky was painted with hues of orange and purple, the clouds tinged with silver from the fading sunlight. Emily leaned against Luke, feeling the warmth of his presence and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I've never felt this safe before," she admitted softly. "I didn't think I could feel like this again." Luke looked at her with a gentle smile. "It's not about being perfect or unbroken. It's about finding someone who will be there through everything, and I want to be that person for you." Emily felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and hope. She realized that trust wasn't about rushing or forcing feelings. It was about consistency, patience, and showing up when it mattered most. Luke had shown her that brokenness didn't define her. It was simply a part of her story, one that could be shared, held, and cared for. As summer moved toward autumn, Emily and Luke continued to grow closer. They shared quiet evenings on the ranch, simple meals, and conversations that stretched late into the night. Emily found herself opening up more and more, trusting Luke with her fears, dreams, and even the parts of herself she had long thought unlovable. And Luke, in turn, shared his life with her, revealing the depth of his character, the strength of his values, and the kindness of his heart. But life, as Emily knew, was never without challenges. There were moments of doubt, times when her past fears resurfaced, and she questioned whether she was ready for the kind of closeness she had found with Luke. Each time, he met her hesitations with patience, never pressuring her, never judging. His steady presence became a mirror of what she could become, someone resilient, courageous, and capable of love despite her scars. One evening, as they sat together by a fire Luke had built in the barn, Emily reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the first time she had said, "I'm broken," and how Luke had responded with quiet courage and care. That simple act had been the beginning of a transformation she hadn't anticipated. She realized that healing didn't come from magic or sudden changes. It came from moments of trust, kindness, and the willingness to share life with someone who truly understood you. Emily leaned closer to Luke, feeling the warmth of the fire and the steady comfort of his presence. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being here, for holding my pieces." Luke took her hand in his eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "You don't need to thank me. We all have pieces that need holding. I'm just glad I can be here for you." That night, as Emily walked home through the quiet streets of the town, she felt a deep sense of peace. The storm had passed, both literally and figuratively, and she knew that while challenges would continue to come, she no longer had to face them alone. She had found someone willing to stand beside her, to share the weight of her struggles, and to remind her that brokenness was not the end. It was simply a part of life, one that could be transformed by care, patience, and love. For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that with Luke by her side, she could face it. Brokenness no longer felt like a curse. It felt like a bridge, a way to connect, to heal, and to grow stronger together. And that realization, small and quiet as it was, became the foundation of a new chapter in her life, one filled with trust, courage, and the promise of something beautiful yet to come. Autumn had arrived in the small town, painting the streets and hills with shades of gold, orange, and red. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant fires. Emily found herself walking to the cafe with a renewed sense of hope, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She had learned to trust again, at least in small measures, and Luke had become a steady presence in her life, a grounding force she could rely on. But even in the midst of hope, life had a way of testing the heart. Emily's past wasn't something she could simply leave behind. Old wounds resurfaced, and memories she had tried to bury came back to her in unexpected moments. She remembered the failed relationships, the betrayals, and the loneliness that had once seemed unending. Each memory brought with it a pang of fear, a reminder that trust could be fragile, and that hearts could be easily broken. One evening, after a long day at the cafe, Emily sat alone on a bench outside, the sky painted with fading orange light. She thought about her life, the progress she had made, and the moments she had shared with Luke. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet fear lingered. What if she allowed herself to care too much and it ended in pain? What if her heart, so fragile from years of disappointment, couldn't handle the joy and closeness she now felt? Luke appeared as if sensing her thoughts, his presence calm and reassuring. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," he said gently, taking a seat beside her. Emily looked at him, hesitating. "Sometimes I worry. I think about the past, about everything I've been through, and I wonder if I'm ready to let someone in completely." Luke nodded thoughtfully. "It's normal to feel that way. Healing isn't a straight path. You don't have to have everything figured out, and you don't have to rush. You just need to take it one step at a time." Emily appreciated his words, but the fear didn't disappear completely. She realized that trust and love were not just about opening your heart. They were about risking pain, and that risk was always frightening. Luke, however, made her feel safe enough to face that fear. He didn't promise a perfect life or pain-free days, but he offered consistency, patience, and the assurance that she didn't have to carry her burdens alone. A few days later, an unexpected challenge arose. Luke's father, who owned a neighboring ranch, fell seriously ill, leaving Luke with the responsibility of managing both ranches. The work was exhausting, and Luke found himself stretched thin. Emily noticed the strain in his movements, the fatigue in his eyes, and the quiet tension in his voice when he spoke about the tasks ahead. She wanted to help, but she feared she wasn't strong enough to make a real difference. "Come with me tomorrow," Luke said one evening, sensing her hesitation. "I could use an extra hand, and it would mean a lot to have you there." Emily agreed, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. The next morning they rose before dawn, walking together through the dew-covered fields. The work was harder than she anticipated, feeding animals, mending fences, lifting hay bales, but she refused to give up. Luke guided her patiently, showing her how to do each task, and never once made her feel incapable. Despite the hard labor, Emily found herself smiling. There was a sense of satisfaction in working alongside someone she trusted, in contributing to something larger than herself. She began to understand that love wasn't just about quiet moments or shared laughter. It was also about standing together in challenging times, supporting each other when life demanded strength and resilience. But the physical strain wasn't the only challenge. Emily also faced emotional struggles she hadn't expected. Memories of past betrayals and heartbreak resurfaced, and moments of self-doubt crept in. She worried that she wasn't enough for Luke, that her brokenness would eventually push him away. Some nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she deserved the care and attention he offered so freely. Luke, ever perceptive, noticed her quiet withdrawal. He didn't confront her with pressure or questions. Instead, he offered small acts of reassurance, a gentle touch, a smile that conveyed understanding, a simple word of encouragement. He gave her the space to confront her fears while reminding her that she wasn't alone. One particularly cold evening, after a long day of work, Emily sat quietly in the barn, staring at the animals as they settled for the night. She felt tears welling up, the weight of her past pressing down on her. Luke approached, carrying a small lantern to light the space. Without saying a word, he sat beside her and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I know it's not easy," he said softly, "but you're stronger than you think. You've faced so much already, and yet here you are. That matters." Emily leaned into him, allowing herself to release some of the fear and sadness she had held inside for so long. In that moment, she realized that strength wasn't about never feeling pain or fear. It was about allowing someone to be there for you, even when the world felt heavy. Luke wasn't trying to fix her. He was simply willing to share the burden, and that was more healing than she had ever imagined possible. Over the following weeks, Emily and Luke continued to face challenges together. There were long days of work on the ranch, unexpected storms that damaged fences and rooftops, and moments when life's pressures threatened to overwhelm them both. But through it all, their bond grew stronger. They learned to communicate, to support each other, and to recognize the quiet victories hidden within daily struggles. Emily began to see her own growth reflected in Luke's eyes. She realized that she had become more patient, more resilient, and more willing to embrace vulnerability. She no longer feared her brokenness as something shameful. Instead, she saw it as a part of her story, a story that Luke had chosen to be a part of. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real, grounded in mutual respect, care, and the willingness to face life's challenges together. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day repairing a fence damaged by the wind, they sat together on a hill overlooking the ranch. The sky was painted with the soft hues of twilight, and the wind carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves. Emily rested her head on Luke's shoulder, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. "I never imagined life could feel like this," she said quietly. "I mean to feel safe, to feel cared for, and to actually trust someone again. I was afraid I'd never feel that way." Luke wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "You deserve this, Emily. You deserve to be held, to be cared for, and to know that someone sees you for who you really are. Brokenness doesn't make you less, it makes you human, and I want to be here for all of it." Emily felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and love. She realized that the struggles they had faced together, both emotional and physical, had strengthened their connection. She had learned that vulnerability was not weakness, but a pathway to deeper trust and intimacy. And she understood, finally, that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, being present, and accepting each other fully, cracks and all. As the nights grew longer and colder, Emily and Luke continued to build a life together, brick by brick, day by day. They laughed, they worked, and they shared quiet moments of reflection. Emily found herself dreaming of the future, not as a distant, impossible hope, but as something tangible, grounded in the reality of their shared life. And while challenges still arose, Emily faced them with a newfound courage. She had learned that she didn't have to be invincible or unbroken to deserve love. She only had to be willing to trust, to show up, and to allow someone to hold her pieces with care and respect. Luke had shown her that love could be steady, patient, and transformative, and she knew that no matter what life threw at them, they would face it together. For Emily, the journey was far from over. There would be more struggles, more moments of doubt, and more tests of trust. But she had learned the most important lesson of all, that being broken didn't make her unworthy. It made her human. And finding someone willing to hold those pieces didn't mean losing herself. It meant discovering the strength and beauty in vulnerability, and the courage to embrace life fully, even when it wasn't easy. And so, amidst the golden leaves and crisp autumn air, Emily and Luke's story continued. They faced challenges, shared victories, and learned to navigate life together. Brokenness was no longer a burden to bear alone. It was a bridge to connection, healing, and love. And in each other's presence, they discovered that even the most fragile pieces could be held safely, and that the heart, though tested, could grow stronger and more resilient than ever before. Winter was slowly approaching the small town, bringing with it crisp mornings, frosted windows, and a quiet calm that blanketed the streets. Emily could feel the change in the air as she walked to the cafe, the soft crunch of leaves and early frost under her feet reminding her that time moved steadily forward. She reflected on how far she had come in the past months, how much had changed in her life, and how someone as patient and kind as Luke had become a cornerstone of her days. The story of her brokenness, which had once felt like a heavy shadow over her heart, no longer defined her. She had learned that pain and fear were not enemies to be banished, but pieces of her journey that could be understood and shared. And Luke had been there every step of the way, not to fix her or erase her past, but to walk beside her, holding her pieces gently and faithfully. One chilly afternoon, Luke invited Emily to the ranch for a quiet day together. The snow had not yet fallen, but the air carried the promise of winter. They walked together through the fields, the soft golden light of late afternoon casting long shadows across the land. Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. She realized that this feeling of safety and trust was rare and precious, and she held it close, not wanting to take it for granted. They reached a small hill overlooking the ranch, where Luke often went to watch the sunset. Emily sat down on the soft grass, her hands resting in her lap, and took in the beauty of the moment. Luke sat beside her, a comforting presence, steady and calm. They didn't need to speak immediately. The silence between them was full, warm, and reassuring. After a few minutes, Emily turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "You know, I never imagined I could feel like this again. Safe, cared for, even happy." Luke smiled gently, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "It's not about imagining it. You've worked for it in your own way. You've learned to trust, to accept help, and to open yourself up. That's what makes this real, Emily. Not perfection, not magic, but the steps we take together." Emily felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude. She thought about all the nights she had spent alone, feeling lost and invisible. She remembered the pain of past betrayals and heartbreaks, the way she had built walls around her heart to protect herself. And now she realized those walls had slowly come down, not because life had become perfect, but because she had found someone willing to stand beside her through everything. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Their bond had not been built on grand gestures or dramatic events, but on patience, consistency, and understanding. Luke had never tried to rush her, never forced her to feel more than she was ready to feel. He had simply been present, steadfast, and caring, a quiet strength that had allowed her to trust and, eventually, to love again. Emily took a deep breath and leaned slightly closer to him. "I used to think being broken meant I'd never be enough," she said softly. "But I see now that brokenness isn't the end. It's part of life. And maybe, if you're lucky, someone will be willing to hold the pieces with you, rather than leaving you to carry them alone." Luke turned to her, his expression tender. "And that's exactly what I want to do. I don't want to fix you, Emily. I don't want you to change who you are. I just want to be here for the pieces that need holding and for the parts of you that are already whole." Emily smiled through the tears, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She realized in that moment that love didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to be flawless or dramatic. True love, she understood now, was steady. It was about showing up, being present, and accepting someone completely, with all their history, all their struggles, and all their hope. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Luke continued to build their life together. The cafe remained Emily's place of work, but her days felt lighter, filled with purpose and connection. Luke's ranch work continued, and Emily joined him whenever she could, helping with small tasks, caring for the animals, and learning the rhythms of ranch life. Their days were simple, quiet, and ordinary, but that simplicity was exactly what made them extraordinary. Emily noticed changes within herself she hadn't expected. She laughed more freely, felt joy in small victories, and no longer feared her own vulnerability. She had learned that opening up didn't mean risking unbearable pain. It meant discovering strength she didn't know she had, and allowing someone to share life with her fully. Luke had taught her, in ways both subtle and profound, that being broken wasn't a flaw. It was a part of the human experience, and sharing it with someone trustworthy could transform it into something beautiful. One cold evening, as the first snow began to fall softly outside, Luke invited Emily to the farmhouse. They sat by the fireplace, the warm glow of the flames reflecting on their faces. The quiet crackle of the fire filled the room, blending with the occasional sound of snowflakes landing on the roof. Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the comfort of the fire or the warmth of the room, but for the life she had been able to build with Luke by her side. "I never thought I'd feel this complete," Emily said softly, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "Not because everything is perfect, but because I've learned that I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be unbroken, and I don't have to face life alone." Luke reached across the table and took her hand in his. "You've earned this, Emily. You've faced your fears, embraced your vulnerability, and allowed someone to care for you. That takes courage, and I promise I'll keep being here as long as you'll let me." Emily's heart swelled with emotion. She realized that the greatest gift Luke had given her wasn't just love. It was the reassurance that brokenness didn't make her unworthy, that her heart could heal, and that happiness was possible even after pain. She had learned that life's struggles didn't have to define her. They could shape her, make her stronger, and bring her closer to someone who truly understood her. The winter months passed peacefully, filled with shared routines, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Emily and Luke continued to support each other through challenges, small and large, never taking their bond for granted. Each act of care, each word of encouragement, and each shared silence deepened their connection, building a foundation of trust and love that was resilient and enduring. As Christmas approached, the town was decorated with lights and festive cheer. Emily walked through the snow-covered streets, feeling a sense of belonging she had never known. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the pain and loneliness of her past to the trust, love, and hope she now felt. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that she no longer had to face them alone. On Christmas Eve, Luke invited Emily to the ranch for a small celebration. They decorated a tree together, shared a simple meal, and exchanged small gifts. But the most meaningful gift of all was their presence with each other, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had shared and the future they were building together. Emily realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about being there, holding the pieces, and walking side by side through life's ups and downs. As the evening drew to a close, Emily stepped outside into the crisp winter night. Snowflakes fell softly around her, and she felt a sense of peace she had never thought possible. She looked back at the warm glow of the farmhouse, where Luke stood waiting with a gentle smile, and she knew that she had found something rare and precious, someone willing to hold her pieces, love her wholly, and share life with her fully. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs, and whispered to herself, "This is what it feels like to be truly seen, truly loved, and truly alive." She knew that the journey wasn't over, that life would continue to challenge and surprise her. But she also knew that with Luke by her side, she could face anything. Her brokenness was no longer a source of shame. It was a part of her story, a story that had led her to a love that was patient, steadfast, and unwavering. And so, in the quiet beauty of a winter night, Emily and Luke's story reached a moment of fulfillment. It wasn't the end of life's challenges, nor the conclusion of their journey, but it was a beginning. A life built on trust, understanding, and the courage to embrace love despite fear. Emily's heart, once fragile and guarded, was now open, resilient, and full of hope. And in Luke's steady presence, she knew that the pieces of her past were safe, held gently, and transformed into something beautiful, a life renewed, a heart healed, and a love that would endure.